Welcome to Raising 10, the podcast where we explore the lessons of fatherhood, family, and leadership. Today we're asking a powerful question. What if the way we guide our children became the model for how we led in business? As parents, we teach patience, empathy, accountability, and vision. And often our kids teach us those same qualities right back. In this episode, we'll uncover how parenting principles can transform the way we lead teams, build trust, and inspire growth. Let's dive into the wisdom our children share and discover how leading like we parent can change the way we work. Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. This is Raising 10, episode 3. And I appreciate you guys listening. My podcast is doing really well right now. I really like how I'm getting a ton of views on my Facebook channel, so keep that up. Share it. Go to my YouTube channel and look at my playlist. You'll see all the Raising 8 and Raising 10 podcasts there. And please subscribe if you're on that YouTube channel. You can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or hit me up on any kind of social media. I'm all over the place. And I know you know that because you're liking or looking at my videos. So today, we've talked about a lot of things on this Raising 8 and Raising 10 podcast. Anything from divorce to, you know, uh, managing relationships to me just telling stories about my kids. But something I've been thinking a lot about lately was how much we learn from our children. Now, of course, we're guiding our kids and teaching them things and teaching them leadership skills and teaching them how to handle business and to communicate and all these things that they have to do in school. And hopefully it's going to resonate when they get older. But we never give credit to the kids and how much they're teaching us about leadership. So I think I'm a natural leader, and I've been like that since I was young, in sports and in business and in things like that. But I can tell you a lot of those leadership skills came from learning from my kids, how I watched them lead, how I watched them accomplish things, and how I watch them now as adults uh, leading their life. And I'm not one of those guys that says, and I do say this, I shouldn't say it, that I used to that, oh, that's not the way we did things. We did them like this. And that's true, but those times are gone and we do things different now. So a lot of times I'm watching my kids that are, in business and how they're handling themselves, and I'm learning from them still. I'm not sure you can teach leadership. I think you can learn it, but I don't know if there's a way to really teach it. Or if you sat in a classroom and they said, this is what you have to do to become a good leader. I think being a good leader comes from being compassionate and empathetic and all these things that we're teaching our kids and that we're learning ourselves. And as we get older, we get more patient, hopefully, and handle things differently. I have a conversation with my grandson recently about what you're saying in business and how people are construing that, because people are people and things happen in business and in life, that it's a telephone game, right? You say one thing to one person, and as it goes down the line, that story changes, and how those people frame what you said can change how you're getting viewed from the person they're talking to. So you remember years ago, they used to say, more moms were staying home with their kids, right? And they used to say, well, if you added up what a mom's worth is, you would have to, pay her to be a nurse, to be a cook, to be a organizer, to be all these other things, a coach, and all these things, and they would come up with, this person is worth $175,000 for doing all these jobs. And that still hasn't changed. And we can say the same about men, that men go out and produce, if you put it into a business, relatable thing, you'd say, well, mom's the operations manager and dad's the sales manager, right? He's the one bringing in the income. This is back then. I know there's a lot of double income families now and a lot of single moms out there raising their kids, and they're having to do it all. And uh, I think that when we're teaching our kids things, we're learning at the same rate from them. And I think that's awesome. And I think you need to understand that. First of all, just being a parent, you're a superstar. It doesn't matter how you became a parent, if you know what you're doing. Every parent out there is doing their best um, to raise their kids right and to teach them the things they need to learn. I tell you, if I did it again these days, I was watching some videos the other day about sports, and the odds are what the odds are that your child's going to be a professional athlete, and it is so slim. It's not even funny. Even going to college and playing sports in college is very slim. I think I would have spent more time teaching my kids, and we did a good job at this, by the way, teaching them how to communicate with people, teaching them not to procrastinate, teaching them to have discipline. And you can see it and it resonates in their family, what they're doing now. So, like I said, I think we did a good job at it, but I would spend more time probably on soft skills for my kids if I were you and you were doing it these days because of AI and social media. A lot of kids don't have those soft skills, those communicative skills you really need in business and in life. Because I got news for you, and you know this, and it's hard to tell your kids this, that when they turn 18, you're you're their go-to person. There's a lot of people out there that don't care what happens to them, how they if they succeed or not, right? Because now you're in that hustle and bustle world, and people just don't care. They've got too many things going on in their own. And so I think it's important that we make sure we teach those kids those soft skills. They don't teach them in school, and it's just not, you know, they just don't get taught those things. We are going to be on the hook for that. So as I'm thinking about, and all of you parents, by the way, are leaders. If you're not a leader professionally, you're leading at home and you're doing all those things, making sure the kids have everything they need, helping them with their education, helping them with all these things that they. And then just think about this: if in business, let me back up. I often get calls from my kids about their kids, right? Hey, this one's doing this and this one's doing that, and this is how I handled it. And generally, they're 100% on mark. But once in a while, I can offer some things up that would, give them an opportunity to, succeed in that situation. What I often tell my kids is this: if they call me and they ask me about a professional decision they want to make, and maybe they got a promotion coming up, or should I go for this job or something like that, I always tell them, what would you tell your children? I would hope that you would never steer your kids in the wrong direction. So if you put that decision onto, what if my kids were asking me this decision about maybe going for something, and here I am, I'm just kind of starting a new life, a new profession at 63. And if my kids came to me at 30 and asked me, should I start this new job? I would say go for it. I would say if you're passionate about it and you love doing it, I would say go for it. So a lot of times I will just put that back on them and say, look, what would you tell your children to do? Because you're not going to steer them wrong. So you won't steer yourself wrong. And look, you can make decisions that don't turn out right. Sometimes it's just timing. It doesn't matter. We've rolled the dice a little bit and lost in the last 5 years, and it's it's painful, right? We're digging our way out, but it was just time, right? With COVID and all those things that went on, some of the decisions we made didn't work out as the best that they could have. And conversely, we made some decisions in the past that were on board, totally awesome. I tried some new things. I got into some new jobs. I got into different industries, and it worked out great. But what if you were a leader in business and you treated your employees a little bit more like you treated your kids? For instance, if your kids do something wrong, you hopefully don't berate them. You kind of sit them down and go, you know what, that decision you made wasn't the perfect decision. It wasn't the right decision. And that's okay, right? You're going to make mistakes. You're going to get bad grades. Things are going to happen. And if we treated our employees more like that, more from an encouraging point of view rather than a berating point of view. You think of it this way: if you had an employee that wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, and you sat them down and you talked to them, are you talking to them and telling them that they can't do that anymore, or are you encouraging them or looking at their talents and trying to make them the best version of themselves? Because that's what we do with our kids, I hope. You're looking at your kids and you're saying, well, this one thinks like this. I think steering her in this direction or steering him in this direction is going to give him the best chances to succeed. And if we did that with our employees, which people talk a lot about doing this in this new culture we have, and not new, it's been around for 10 or 15 years where we talk more about company culture and how we should encourage our kids to, or excuse me, how to encourage our employees to be more successful and get them the tools they need to be more successful. You see, I've had kids that needed a little tutoring help or things like that, and I went out and got that help. Or I had a sibling, one of their siblings that could help them in that area to make them succeed at a higher level. Are we doing that with our employees? If we thought about our employees, not as our kid, not as being a kid, but as the things we would tell our children, being more encouraging and being, more of a cheerleader, we'd probably get a lot more out of our employees. I know I was in a company last year and they were having a culture problem. There's no doubt about it. And I was hired to come in and fix that culture problem. And one of the first things I did was learned about the person's job, what they were doing, what they were required to do, how they felt it should be done. A lot of times we're telling employees to do things a certain way when they know better how to do it. They might have been doing it longer. They were definitely doing it longer than me because I was new to the business. But as I did that, as that person felt more encouraged and felt more like they were getting backed up, their level of performance was skyrocketing. They were doing a much better job. And oddly enough, when I went to work for this company, one of the person I'm talking about, they wanted me to fire almost right away. But I said, you know what, let me get in there and talk to her and kind of feel out what the situation is and see what's going on. And what I learned is what they were kind of putting hurdles up in her way. And they weren't really knowing what she was doing on a regular basis and how much it impacted the company positively. So I did not fire her, and then I refused to fire her after they asked me to do it again and again and again. There wasn't a personality conflict at all, but they felt like she wasn't doing her job, at the level they wanted her to do it at. So I left. They let me go because it wasn't going fast enough, and which is typical in these companies. See, sometimes you go to work for a company and they're no good, and you don't know that until you get in there. Anyway, ultimately they have fired her at this point, and I still think it was a bad decision because I really think the gal was doing a great job. Um, the other thing we do in business a lot of times, we'll sit people down in a room and say, "Look, things are a little slow. We're going to have to let a couple of you go." Now, I joked around one time with the kids and got them all at the table. We had all 8 kids there, and said, "Look, things are tight. Dad lost his job, and I'm going to have to let one or two of you go," which was funny at the time. Um, I actually did have a daughter that worked for me that I had to let go from a job because she wasn't doing what she was supposed to do. She wasn't being responsible, and it was starting to affect my position, and that wasn't going to happen. And I know that sounds cold. I know it sounds cold. It's kind of like when girls cry around me. It doesn't do anything for me. You can cry all you want. It won't affect my emotions. I'm going to stick to what the task is at hand. But anyway, so what if we treated our employees a little bit more, like I said, like our kids? We looked at their situation, maybe their personal life was in a shambles, and of course we can't ask about that. Maybe they told us about that. When somebody said in this podcast a couple of weeks ago, if somebody calls in sick, I'm very empathetic to that. Or if they have you know, they can't get their kids to childcare because they're ill, and the parents have to make a decision. I always, would plan for that, and if it happened, we just take care of business, and I wouldn't make them feel guilty or anything like that. I've really never had an employee that just blatantly called in sick all the time. And in some of the businesses I've been in, that does go on, but for me, it wasn't really an issue. Excuse me. And so, like I said, we're learning all these leadership skills from our kid from day one. And like I said, we're being encouraging to our kids and we're teaching them things and we're getting them the help they need if they do need it. I have a podcast coming up in a week or so about autism, and you really got to watch this podcast. This woman has an autistic child, and she has dove into this subject, and I think she went to Yale or Harvard or something and she's very easy to listen to, and she's very intelligent, and it's going to be a really good podcast. So, so what I wanted to, like I said, this podcast is really about what we can do as employers or as managers or as leaders in industry that resonate that we did with our children, not resonate, that we did with our children and help them succeed. I was going to say something and I forgot, but that's okay. We have to be so many times as my kids were getting older, they were doing things, they were being successful at a level that maybe I wasn't successful as a child. And I was very proud of them and watching them. And I also kind of watched their habits. We had some kids that were very articulate, clean, some kids that weren't so clean, not clean, dirty, but um, disorganized, maybe is a better word. And, but that was their personality. And I remember I had one child that was, I'd go to her desk in her school and it would just be a total mess. And the teachers would even talk to me about it. But the funny thing is if she needed something, she knew right where it was at. We just have those people that have that personality. My son was so clean, so organized every time when he lived with me for a short time. And now, even in his life, he's very meticulous. Everything's in the right place. He has white carpet and has 6 kids and a dog, and they keep everything really meticulous. He keeps his cars perfect, like I used to when I was a kid. And I was always a very organized child and very I never really had a mess in my room. There was no clothes on the floor. There was none of that. I did my own laundry. I did all that stuff. So, like I said, so this whole podcast was about what if we led in business like we parented at home. Now, if I know you can't say this in the HR world, but I will say it. If I had 2 candidates that I was going to hire, and one had a family, and not a huge family, but a family, and one didn't, I would be more apt to lean towards the person with the family because I know the skills it takes to keep those people organized. Now, that's a horrible thing to say because the 2 leaders that I've ever been around that were the best leaders I had, one of them has one child and one of them had no children, and they were exceptional leaders. One is still in business, killing it out there. He's been on my podcast actually. And the other guy it was when I wasn't working for him, I was working with their company. And he had really amazing leadership skills. Him and his wife that never had children, and he had run some huge organizations. And you could just listen to him speak for a half an hour and understand why he got those jobs. I used to ask people on my podcast when I first started, because it was really just about business and it was a whole plethora of things that I talked about. And next week I'm going to do a podcast that has nothing to do with raising kids. It does, but it's not going to be part of the Raising 10 series. And I used to ask people, give me who was a leader in your life or a teacher or somebody like that that really stood out. And I never really had anybody as a teacher that would stick out to me that was a really good leader or a really good teacher. And in business, I never worked for anybody that I thought was a very good leader. They were usually an 80s, demanding type leader that you got to do this, or it's my way or the highway kind of leader. And my guests would oftentimes not be able to come up with an answer because I just don't think there's that many great leaders in the world. You can see it in our political situation. There's just not these great leaders. But I've seen some parents that were exceptional leaders and not in business as as parents they were really good leaders. Kept their kids very organized, kept them very focused. Generally, those kids were the ones that went to college and succeeded highly in college. I had kids that did succeed in college and kids that did not go to college. I don't know if that's on me, but they had to make decisions when they were 18, 19, 20, whatever. And I don't, that's their decision. And we would discuss it and I would tell them, look, these are some signs it might not work for you. I mean, here I don't have a degree and I'm having a problem. But finding those jobs because I'm that lack of degree. So when I said that thing about the HR situation and taking a person that has a family over, I read through hundreds of job ads all the time and send out resumes. I've had several interviews. I've had, several rejections, way more rejections than obviously than I want. But it's funny. I've always wondered if I should put on my resume that I'd had this size family. Now, you can't ask that in an interview, but someone can tell you if they have a big family. And at this point on my resume, I have my speaking and I have my podcast. So if they took a second and looked, they'd find out that I had a large family. And that could be good or bad. They could look at that as well. He's never going to be here because his kids are sick. Well, not now. I don't have kids at home, but except grandkids. Or it could be a positive. And, like I said, I think we probably should consider that more. But like I said, in an HR world in California, especially, you can't ask those questions. Their personal life is none of your business. Although they make decisions based on that, they'll never tell you that. And I don't know. It's kind of an odd thing. I would uh, much rather have a parent as an employee than not. And that's a horrible thing to say, but I don't I don't hire people. So I wouldn't kick someone to the curb if they weren't a parent. But like I said, if it was everything equal, if someone was a parent, I would understand. I could resonate a little bit more with their life and what they have to go through on a regular basis. So again, awesome parents out there. I know you're doing what's the best interest of your children, and that's exactly what you're supposed to do as a parent, right? And I know that you're getting them those things, but think about this: how much have you learned from your kids? You've learned a lot more than you probably think, especially if you have kids that have multiple. I almost said multiple personalities. That's not what I meant. When you have a lot of kids and there's a lot of different personalities, you can pick out some really good traits from those different children, and it really will help you in life, especially in leadership or management positions. And and that's pretty cool. I mean, that's a real positive thing about having children is you're going to learn something from them. And then all the pride that goes with it. I've told you this before. I was at my granddaughter was in a play this weekend, and the play was amazing. This school that put it on, Maranatha Christian School, put on a put on Frozen. I'd never seen the movie. I don't watch cartoons generally. And now after seeing it, I want to see the movie because they really did such a wonderful job. And I tell you, something I really learned from my granddaughter in this is it was really a grueling schedule for her with rehearsals and things like that. I mean, it was brutal. And she was out late a couple nights, and she's only 11. So she was out till like 9 o'clock, 9:30 some nights. She'd have to get back up from school. She still got to do her homework. She got to do all these things. And there was a lot of little kids in this show too. It was from, kindergarten up to 12th grade. So some of these little dudes, they must have been really struggling with sleep and things like that because they probably were up an hour later than they're supposed to be during the week, but they still had responsibility to get to school. But I was so irritated at the rehearsal schedule. But after seeing the play, the woman that was running this did a fantastic job. And I was very proud of my granddaughter keeping up and doing all the things she was supposed to do. And she was great in the play. And she's getting better and better. Every time she gets in one of these plays, you can see her confidence is coming up. You know, uh, you can see how much more animated she is. She's really acting now. She's starting to get that kind of thing. And this is one of those things, like I said, with your employees. Are you telling them once in a while, listen, I'm really proud of the way you're working lately? I used to always thank my employees when I left for the day. Look, I really appreciate you guys, what you're doing. You're making me look good, and I appreciate that. And if you need anything, you just got to let me know, and I'll get you whatever you need. You're going to have to explain to me some things why you need them. But if it's legitimate, we're going to get you what you need. So you can, it helps so much for you to be a great leader with your kids. It helps you so much in business. You don't even have any idea because you probably never thought about it. You watch your kids work through injuries in sports and things like that and still come back and make a comeback, or a kid that really tries hard and starts coming back in a grade, in a class. My grandson graduated a year early because he put a lot of effort into it. So proud of him that he did that, because I know how much work it was because I did it. And it's showing in what his work ethic too. He's got a good, all my kids are really hard workers. I mean, if we've done nothing right in our life, we trained our kids to work hard and to understand that they have a responsibility at their job to not only the customer, but to management and to the company. And they should appreciate them, their job. They should appreciate the company letting them work there. I know that sounds a little, I don't know, that sounds a little nuts, but I think you got to have gratitude. And I think there's a lot of gratitude there. But it's, you got to reciprocate too. As an employer, you have to show your employees that you have gratitude. So I think you get the gist of what I'm talking about. I'm going to wrap this podcast up. I'm going to do one next week for the holidays. I want to talk about how the holidays used to be and how they are now. And not that they're so much worse, but they're very different as an adult. And my kids are adults now. It's wonderful to see what's going on with them. And I just want to tell you what's going on with us. And I'll put some other twists into that. So listen, I really appreciate you listening to my podcast. I got some good guests coming up. This thing's going to keep going. We have a lot of topics to cover. I just want to thank you for listening. I want to tell you I'm proud of you parents out there that have done a good job with your kids, because we have to deal with your kids. And for those parents that are struggling, hang in there. Everything gets better. Everything changes. You're not stuck at a certain age for that long. Your kids are going to challenge you. That's okay. That's part of being a parent. That teaches you a lot of patience, teaches you a lot of wisdom. And I'm just proud of all of you. And I appreciate what you do as a parent, since I've been one and am one. So remember, you can get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits.com. If you want to be a guest, or you have somebody that would be a guest, I'm looking for a teacher that's a mother. I'd be very interested to have a mother on as a teacher, because I think there's a lot of ground we could cover, and they can give me a point of view that I don't have. I don't have a mother's point of view, and I don't have a teacher's point of view. So again, thank you for listening. If you don't see my podcast next week, happy Thanksgiving. Try to stay dry if you're in San Diego. We got some more rain coming this weekend. Again, thank you for listening. This is the Ed Franklin Raising 10 podcast. This is episode 3, and there is so much more to come. Just keep watching.